Subscribe, please.
Hey guys, welcome back. It's your favorite Gimp with a limp, and I'm here with a little bit different video for you today. I'm talking about 3D printers and the accessories and the cool stuff that you can take and make using them to kind of accentuate your wargaming experience. Now, this is going to be much more useful for people who are into miniatures or miniature-based games like X-Wing, Kill Team, 40K. You're going to get a lot more effect from a 3D printer than a stereotypical wargamer who's into counter-based stuff. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't things that you can print using a 3D printer that'll help with counter-based wargames. There's a few things that I've printed, like some bowls that hold counters and neat stuff like that. But you are going to have just more options available to you when it comes to 3D printing. When it comes to miniature-based games, just because there are so many more files and things available for you. In the background, I've actually got a video playing at fast speed of a print that I had going, just a little part that I was making for my printer. And you guys can see I've got an Ender 3 that I actually got for Christmas, and I've been playing with this thing like mad ever since I got it. And I gotta say, I love it. You can get into the 3D printing hobby relatively cheaply now, compared to how it used to be. Back in the day, you had to spend at least $400 or $500 to get anything near halfway decent. There were some Kickstarters that failed kind of miserably on some of them. Some of them actually succeeded when it came to 3D printers at a lower cost price point. But now the technology has advanced to the point that if you have a little mechanical know-how, you can take and get into the hobby without having to spend a fortune. For example, this Ender 3, the one that I'm using, you can get for roughly $200 depending on where you order it. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, but right at that price point, which is a relatively cheap price for a good 3D printer. I've had a lot of success with this thing, and it's been printing good quality prints for me at a cheap price. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, when I say 3D printer, there are multiple different types, okay? Without getting into all the other different types of specifics, let's just say there's filament based, which is basically liquid plastic. It's coming in a little tube and it's melted and extruded out in a line, and it makes a whole bunch of lines together to make your 3D model. And then you have your SLA, which is the resin base, and that's light based. There's toxic chemicals involved with it. So I'm just going to say right off the bat, if you're new into 3D printing and you're wanting to kind of get your feet wet, don't go with resin. Resin does produce a higher quality print, just depending on whatever you're printing, than a FDM printer like this one will produce, just because of the nature of the resin print and how it's done. But it's so much more difficult to work with. There's so many more things that you need to know, not to mention the fact that it is a toxic material. When it's in its liquid form, the resin is toxic, and you need to take a lot of steps to protect yourself. And then after the model's actually printed, you have to take steps to wash it off. So there's a lot more you have to do besides just popping it off the bed like you can with something like this Ender 3. So if you're new into the hobby, definitely avoid the resin to start with. That can be something that you go into later after you've tried a cheaper 3D printer. If you find you really enjoy it and you want to step up to it, you'll have learned enough through something like this to make that step versus jumping right into it and potentially having issues. Not to mention, like myself, I have small kids, and these things just attract kids. When I first set it up, my little boy, he's 4, he sat there and watched it for hours, just moving back and forth, just mind boggled by it. So kids are attracted to this crap like flies to a one of those little electric buzzers. So make sure you take and avoid the resin for that as well, because they will take and want to play with it, and it has lights that are involved with it, because that's actually its whole photosynthesis process that causes it to cure. But cool little lights on it, the kids are going to want to touch and stick their fingers in the resin, so just avoid that to start with. But I'm going to take and put some pictures on screen for you guys now of some of the stuff that I've printed. Again, a lot of it's kind of X-Wing based because I am into that, but you can print so many other things. Like here you can see I've got a little case that I made for my T-70, which is a X-Wing model, right? and it just makes it to where I can transport my models a whole lot easier without having to worry about them getting damaged. And a lot of these little cases that you can print can take and fit inside the standard little cases that a lot of X-Wing players get to transport their models anyway. You guys can see there's one here that I've got an A-Wing in, and it just makes it neater. Not to mention the fact that every gamer likes to have something interesting and unique to themselves that someone else doesn't have. You know, you want your third-party accessories so the other people there playing are going, ooh, cool, where'd you get that? I want one of those. And you will find once you actually start getting into 3D printing that you have a lot more friends all of a sudden, and people are like, ooh, can you make me this? Or can you make me that? Which is fine. I mean, it's to be expected. It's still a relatively new hobby, you know, all things considered. So it's not as prevalent as people having tablets and computers and, you know, things like that. And people are going to ask you to make them stuff. Just, you know, accept it. It's part of the hobby. But there's so many interesting other things that you can make besides just little holders. That's actually the main thing that I have been printing, that and little toys to play with. On the screen now, I've got a cube that I made, and this is actually a Magic the Gathering cube because I've been looking around for different things that I could just find that, you know, would work for me and look interesting. And it was a cube that someone altered, and it can hold dice and cards and stuff like that. And I've been using it to hold my tokens and dice for X-Wing. And it just looks cool sitting there on the table when you slide the lid off and you take and start pulling out your stuff. And everybody's like, oh, cool, where did you get that? You know, I love it. It is the most cool thing to watch it take shape over a period of time. You know, there's just this little roll of plastic unrolling out, and all of a sudden, you know, a few hours later, you've got this massive cube there, you know, that looks awesome as hell. Now, it does take a long time to print depending on the settings that you're doing. You're going to have to figure out how to dial it in. I'm not going to get into all that because there's so many 3D printing channels there on the internet that will help teach you how to do this. And I am by no means an expert. I'm really new into the hobby, but it does, like I said, it combines well with gaming. You know, so many gamers are into stuff like this anyway. There's no reason for you not to get into it, especially with the cheap price point that it is available at now. Speaking of, you know, gaming, my brother and I, he's been trying to get me into Kill Team as much as possible, and he brought a couple of statues that he had printed. Now, I got a couple on screen now that I've printed. I'm going to paint them up later, but some type of silver or something. I haven't decided how I'm going to paint them. But that's what, you know, tripped me over to wanting to take and get my own 3D printer. When I saw that, you know, it could really accentuate your game. You know, he brought these out. He had just done a little quick gold base coat on them. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. There's so many other things I could make with it. I can't let him have something cool that I don't have, so I'm going to have to take and get one of my own now. So I printed up these couple of statues, just random statues that I found on the website Thingiverse. Thingiverse is going to be your Bible if you get into 3D printing. It's just a free domain where you can download all different types of files that people have uploaded, everything from gaming to household goods to anything else you can think of. It's going to be there on Thingiverse. I mean, they even have... Okay, I won't get into some of the stuff they have there. Let's just say some of it's age restricted, and that kind of tickled me. But there's so much stuff you can print when it comes to 3D gaming, wargaming. Sorry about the camera getting bumped there in the background. My wife had actually bumped it while I was doing this time delay filming. So she put it back, came back, and apologized to me later. I bumped your camera. It'll be fine, hon. Don't sweat it. It's just a thing. Something else that you can get into, and that's going to be printing your own models, right? On screen here, you guys can see a tank that I printed, and it's similar to a 40K tank. I forget exactly what it's called. My brother sent me the file to it. Now, back when 3D printing was a little newer than it is now, a lot of people had uploaded 40K type files to the internet, and a lot of those got IP'd off. You know, Games Workshop didn't want their stuff being pirated. I can't say I blame them. So you're not able to take and get those specific files. But if you do want to create your own miniatures, whether it's for an individual game that you're making for yourself, or D&D, or you just want to make toys for your kids, like this tank that I have, or this little battle car that I made for my kid, you know, you can do that, and it doesn't take all that long to make. I mean, I think that car there was, you know, a few hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours to take and print. The tank was something like 8, maybe 10 hours. I can't remember for sure. It is going to depend also on the settings that you're using. This is something I didn't realize. I thought you just, you know, plugged in the file and hit print and it would just print it. But there's so many different settings that you have to adjust, whether it's the line thickness and how many shells, how many borders the actual print itself has, whether or not it has support material. Like that big 40K looking tank there, you need to have something called support material underneath the turret, the cannon there, because otherwise it's not going to print. It'll just start trying to print plastic in midair, and then you'll have a big spaghetti monster looking mess there on the table, which won't look good, and it could possibly mess up your printer. You can even make little gifts for people. You guys can see here I made this little frog looking thing for my wife. It's a soap dish holder. She's going to use it actually to hold her jewelry and stuff when she jumps in the shower. But she's going to take and paint that up. I've primed it for her already at this point. And she's going to paint it just as a neat little hobby thing. So there are so many things that you can do when it comes to this hobby. You can create your own hobby materials, whether it's printing your own miniatures. You can print accessories for your miniatures, like when it comes to Gaslands. If anyone's into that game, which is really cool, need to check that one out. You can take and print off accessories, whether it's terrain, like the shipping container you guys can see that I have on the screen now, or the parts to actually take and glue to your Hot Wheels cars to make them look better. Because I was having the hardest time trying to find legitimate looking guns that I could take and affix to a Hot Wheels car. There are some that you could order off of Etsy and some other places like that, but I was trying to find, you know, decent ones that I could take and make the car look good. And I went to some toy stores around the area and just tried to buy up some, you know, random little cheap little toys that I could hack apart and put onto my little cars to make them look good. And, you know, that did okay, but this stuff is so much better when you can take and just print off grills, you can print off engines, you can print off miniguns and laser guns and all this cool stuff. So if you're into Gaslands, a 3D printer is almost required. You can take and print off everything you need. They have the starting and finish lines. They have templates. They have dice. They have the affixtions and accessories for all the different cars that you could take and try to make. There was even a tank car that I saw that someone had designed for use with Gaslands on there, which is just freaking awesome that you can take and even go that route with it. So if you're into wargaming, you know, you really need to take a look at 3D printing. It's not that hard to actually get into. It's not cost prohibitive like it used to be. Like I said, this Ender 3, roughly $200. Now, you do need to be just a little technically savvy when it comes to actually put them together, because this one, let's say it was 40% put together. Basically, the base was put together when I got it. So I didn't have to put the whole thing together. The part that you see moving, the base plate itself, and pretty much the parts below that, with the exception of the display off to the right, were put together. But everything else up above that was in pieces and had to be assembled. So all the pulleys and the wheels that it's all running on, and some of the motors and things, do have to be assembled. Now, there are plenty of videos online. They're easy to find on YouTube that walk you through step by step on how to put together one of these machines, and give you good advice on how to go ahead and tweak it for good prints right after you get it put together. Because the little instruction manual that comes with this thing isn't going to tell you everything that you need to know when you're putting it together. It gives you some very basic pictures, and that's about it. Now, the videos show you a lot more, give you advice on, hey, you know, tweak this bolt here or this bolt here to give yourself a stable platform. So once I was actually done putting together my printer and I did the first print with it, my brother was actually amazed. He's like, your first print came out awesome, which isn't usually something that happens with somebody. You know, they usually have to dial in their settings. but mine came out great because I had made those little tweaks and quirks with it as I was putting it together to make sure that it was a good product when I put it together at the end. Now, there are some others that you can get cheaper. I think there's one called the Net A8 that you can even get down as low as maybe 120, 130, but that one is pretty much pieces. Like, there's no major parts put together. It's all completely the parts to it. You are buying a printer that you have to fully assemble yourself. That would definitely not be a way to start out. You really need to have some knowledge to it about 3D printing and how all the parts work together to take and do something like that. Now, after playing with this thing for a while and doing a half assemble with an Ender 3, I think I could assemble one of those if I had, a decent instruction manual or video to follow, at this point. But it's definitely not something I would want to start out with, just due to the fact that, I wouldn't have the knowledge and know what I'm messing with at that point. But anyway, that's it. I just wanted to kind of put it out there that if you've been on the fence or you've thought about getting a 3D printer before, it's definitely worth it. There's so many neat things you can make with it, especially if you're into any type of, I'm going to say 3D wargaming, anything with miniatures. It has so many different things that it can offer. Not to mention just the household utility. I've already been printing off plugs that I can take and little safety plugs for the outlets for babies, since we have young kids in the house and we don't want them to stick forks in it. I printed off a baker's cube that has all the different types of measurements on it. There's so many other little different things that you can make. It is an excellent hobby to get into. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend the Ender 3, and I am not being paid to say that by any means. Creality, the people who make this, don't know me from Adam, but what they do put out is a good printer for the price that you're paying for it. A couple $100s is an excellent price to really get into this. I got to give them props on it. They do have a pro version as well that kind of tweaks some of the stuff that they learned. Like, there's a few placements of parts on the original Ender 3 that could have been done better that they learned from, and they put out a pro version. It costs somewhere like $50, $60 more, just depending on where you get it. It's not a requirement to get the pro version. You can, or the Ender 3 works perfectly fine itself. So it really just depends. If you want to save a little money and then print yourself some parts out to kind of upgrade your Ender 3 up, or you can also buy a glass bed, which I actually have on there now. That's not a glass bed. I put on a glass bed, which I do also recommend buying the glass bed for it. You can buy just a mirror, or just a random piece of glass that you cut into size for the Ender 3, or you can buy a specific glass bed in the shape and size that you need it. I would actually recommend buying the specific one, the Creality. I hope I'm saying that right, the Creality version, because it actually has a special coating on the printable side that actually gives the plastic a little more traction, a little more place to stick. And if you just have an actual glass bed itself with nothing else on it, you're going to have to use something like a glue stick or hairspray, something like that, some type of chemical agent to give yourself an adhesion when you're printing down your first layer. All right, it won't stick that well to a basic glass bed, and then you could potentially knock your print loose and mess it up. So you want to have something to help with that adhesion. I definitely recommend the one that is designed for this. You can get it for about 18 bucks. So again, they're not paying me. They're not giving me anything for it. It's just me saying, hey, I like this. It's a good product. Definitely check it out. It has so many things that it can be used for besides just gaming, but it has a world of stuff that can be used for it when it comes to gaming. All right, that's going to be it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Y'all take care. I'll catch you in the next one.